Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video that's going to be a Patreon exclusive 1960s bonus project video. This is Simplicity 5822. It is a pattern from the early-ish 1960s, I would say, though I haven't actually looked to see if it is dated. Maybe I'll do that some other time. And I let $10 and up patrons vote how much fabric I should use and which design from this pattern that I should follow. And I think all of the options got 16 votes except for the pairing of a Tula pink, gray, and green squirrel print fabric and the fuller skirt with long sleeves variant. So that is what I am going to be doing today, and I've already got the pattern laid out. It was factory folded and none of the pieces have been cut, so it's going to be pretty dreamy to work with, I think. And I'm going to cut it out with pinking shears and sew it with the 5/8 of an inch seam allowances. Pinked edges are the recommended finish for this pattern on the instructions, and I also don't want to faff around with French seams because it has a side placket closure, which is going to be really difficult to do and incorporate with the rest of that seam being closed with French seams. So I'm just going to dive in and chat a little bit. This week has kind of been a disaster in terms of productivity. It's actually been really discouraging that I just have not been feeling up to doing almost anything. And it sucks because the week before that I was feeling so excited about everything I was working on. I was making such good progress on the 1830s writing jacket. I was really pleased with my sunflower remake. I thought I was going to be able to get major progress done on an 1880s project, and I thought I was going to finish up that 1960s project for Sewing Through the Decades, and I just felt like really on top of things, and it deteriorated super quickly because this week I've gotten basically nothing done. I reorganized my bathroom, and I sold, I don't know, several yards of fabric over on Instagram, and that is about it in terms of accomplishments. But hopefully things will pick up, and I'm just trying to acknowledge that some weeks are going to be better than others. Do you know what I have done this week though? I have managed to win 3 eBay auctions. And I almost never win eBay auctions, partially because I never bid on eBay auctions because they give me anxiety. Like, I'm always concerned when I enter my max bid, I'm going to accidentally put an extra 0 on it. And then instead of bidding $15 for a pattern, I'm going to accidentally bid $1,500 and I'm going to end up paying over $1,000 for a stupid piece of paper. Like, that is a very real fear of mine. But there were these vintage Butterick pattern catalogs from the 1940s that got posted. So I contacted the person who was selling them before they listed them on eBay and said I was interested in buying a lot of them if they could tell me when they go for sale or what they would like for them. And then they got back to me with a link to the listing a few hours later. It was kind of annoying because I wanted to buy them outright, but I watched the auctions and I decided I would take my chances, and I ended up winning 2 of them. They were a lot more expensive than I wanted them to be, but I literally thought they might go for hundreds of dollars, and I think they ended up going for like $80 plus shipping, so it could have been worse. And if it had gone much beyond that, I wouldn't have paid it. I was ready to tap out before the auctions hit 100. But yeah, I'm really happy that I won those, and I'm going to do a video about them. I think the catalogs I won are from 1946. And there's one for autumn, and then there's one for November and December. And then the other thing I won is a top hat. This has been a whole thing, but basically I'm working on the 1840s riding costume, and I have put a lot of time into that. The collar's been completely pad stitched. I did the lapel very carefully and properly. The sleeves have all been gathered down by hand, and the main fabric for that project wasn't very expensive. It was a 100% wool flannel that I purchased from Fabric Mart, but it wasn't, I don't know, more than $8 a yard, I don't think. So I didn't have a whole lot invested in this project other than time, which meant I was okay spending a little bit more on accessories for it. So I knew I wanted to pair it with that top hat, and I don't really have the materials or the experience to be able to create a top hat that looks historical. And top hats also historically were made out of a beaver felt, so they actually look like fur if you get up close enough to them, because they are fur. It's just very low pile. So I didn't really have access to a material like that either, and I didn't want to make the hat match the coat because the fabric I'm using for that is kind of a palish blue color, and I just didn't think it'd be very versatile. And I wanted something that I could pair with other riding habits in the future. So I looked on Amazon for something, and I couldn't find anything that had the Victorian shape. So I started looking into vintage ones, and oh my god, there are like top hats listed for $3,000 on eBay. It's insane. But the ones that were more in my price range, around $50 including shipping, were really badly damaged. The hide was just completely tearing away from the base of the hat, and they looked pretty awful. And I didn't want to pay, you know, between $50 or $70 for something that looked awful. So I ended up finding an auction for a Victorian top hat that was ending that evening. It was considerably cheaper than any other perfect condition ones that were listed, and it comes with its own case, and I'm really happy that I won that. And there were like 30 watchers and 15 other bids, so yeah, I've had quite the success spending money on eBay. Aren't you happy for me? I know I've said this on many occasions, but I think for real this time, March is going to be the beginning of a low buy in terms of not just fabric, but everything. I've got a few things I need from Joann's, which I'm planning on picking up at the sale at the end of this month, but hopefully in March I don't buy any fabric unless it is for business purposes. So for things associated with Patreon, like the projects that you guys voted on, or for stuff associated with sponsorships or McCalls. Anyway, now everything is cut out, so I'm going to go over the instructions and then probably start marking things. Actually, it just wants me to start with darts for the front and back pieces, which I can definitely do. I think the only notches I'm going to clip are that one and this one. I don't think I really need any of the others. I guess I'll clip this one too because it might have something to do with the collar. And now I can mark the darts. The project I'm making for the 1960s, the original version I was making had never been used, so the paper is perfectly intact. But the view I've decided to make instead had definitely been used before, and they had used a tracing wheel to transfer all of the darts onto their fabric, and it completely destroyed the pattern. Like, it's barely usable. So that's why I never use that method when I'm sewing things. And I also just find it's not very effective for certain colors of fabric. And I really should have ironed this first. Oops. Recently I've been a lot more careful to fold things nicely after pre-washing, but clearly I washed this before that. Also, speaking of washing, this is like stupid, I'm so excited about this, but I got a sweater drying rack for my shower for hand washing things. So it is basically a little rack with these mesh screens. There are 3 of them stacked on top of each other to create shelves out of this mesh material that kind of resembles what a laundry bag would be made out of. And then it has a hanger on the top, so you can use it to lay sweaters flat to dry without having to take up a whole bunch of floor space. So now I can do 3 sweaters at once, and I got one of those like traditional drying racks from Amazon as well, just the Amazon Basics one, so it folds out and then you can hang clothing over it. And I'm really excited about that too, because up until now I've just been like laying down towels and hanging it over my shower rail, and then like half the clothing is hanging over the lip of the tub and gets all over my floor and onto these wet towels. It's just been not an ideal process. So I'm really excited about my upgraded washing routine. Even if that's really lame, it's gonna make a big difference. I'm sorry for how much I've rambled. I'm very aware of how tired I am, so I'm depending on like constant chatter to keep me awake right now, and you just have to suffer through it. That reminds me though, I can talk about my tea adventures. So a lot of you gave me recommendations for tea, which I really, really appreciated. A lot of you also gave me extreme sympathies for the lack of coffee, and I'm actually not that upset about not being able to have coffee. It's more just the frustration over not having a good alternative, because I don't like coffee. Like, I've been drinking it for several years, and I cannot stomach even the littlest bit of black coffee. I cannot stomach flavored coffee with nothing in it. I can't stomach flavored coffee with just a little bit of milk in it. Like, I hate the taste of coffee. So it's kind of just like necessary to keep me alert, but it was not something that I enjoyed or feel sad to no longer be drinking. But it was kind of unfortunate that my stomach turned to it because, as I said, I depend on that for any liveliness and productivity during a day. So I was originally drinking cinnamon tea, but it was so bland and bitter, and I just did not enjoy it at all. So I ended up purchasing chai tea, which I think is good. That is like the best tea that I've had so far. I steeped it for like half an hour today, and then I put it in the fridge for a little while, and I had it with milk and a little tiny bit of vanilla syrup over ice, and it was awesome. And then I also tried doing that same process, but with a green tea mint tea, and that was pretty nice too. I don't think it tastes nearly as pleasant, but I feel like I could get used to it. And then this morning I tried having a breakfast tea with lemon, and I liked that as well because I found like the citrus lingered more so than the black tea flavor. So I think that is a good candidate for me as well. And I feel like I might actually end up enjoying it at some point in the near future, which is pretty incredible considering I've been at it for less than 2 weeks. I drank coffee for like 2 years and still couldn't stand it. But in my defense, I got very used to having coffee with a large quantity of hot chocolate mix added to it, which made it very unhealthy and was another reason why I wasn't sad to say goodbye to it, because I shouldn't be ingesting that many calories in coffee substances in a day. So now it is time to change the camera battery because it's flashing at me, and when I come back I will have all of these darts pinned and we can get to sewing them. Okay, I still haven't changed the battery, so hopefully this can give us one last run. So I just pinned the facing pieces together. This goes around the back of the neckline, then this runs down the front, and this is going to cover the raw edges from both the neckline and the collar. And speaking of the collar, I just went ahead and interfaced 2 of the pieces because you had to cut out 4 pieces in total. So this is going to be the lining for the collar, and I backed it with little scraps of interfacing I have, so it's kind of patchwork together. I don't know if you can tell. And I don't have very much interfacing, so I might have to add that to my Joann's list before I go on this no-buy for real this time. And then this is the outer piece for the collar. Both of these were just seamed together at the center back with a 5/8 of an inch allowance. So now I'm going to pin these together with the right sides facing each other and sew 5/8 of an inch away from all of the outer edges, leaving this edge open since they'll be matched with the neckline. And speaking of the neckline, I got the darts sewn in both the front and back pieces. So now I have to sew up the shoulder seams with 5/8 of an inch allowances. And it also wants me to stay stitch around the back of the neckline so it won't stretch during the next couple of steps. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so this is the collar. It was kind of annoying how they had this drafted. The corners were extremely sharp, the angle they were at. So no matter how much I trimmed the corner, I wasn't able to get a really nice point. It's almost like they want them to be intentionally nubby like this. And something that isn't annoying about this pattern is the fact that they have you sew the facing in before you do up the side seams. And usually sewing up the side seams is like the second step in every pattern, and it's stupid because that makes it way more difficult to do the collar. Whereas if you just sew up the shoulder seams and you leave the side seams undone, you can get the garment completely flat, which makes it so much easier. So I was really excited to see that. So the way that this will get done is that the collar is placed down with the right side facing outward and the notches aligned, just like that. And then I'm going to pin that or base that and then put the facing right on top of that with the right sides together. And so around that, and that will secure the collar. And then once this is folded inward, it will hide all of the ugly raw edges. And for the facing, I actually went around and I just used my iron to turn the outer edge inward by 1/2 inch. This just makes it a lot easier. You can do this after you sew it onto the garment, but it's easier to do beforehand. And I actually forgot to do this on the dress I was working on last night, and it ended up being really annoying, so I remembered this time. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that all the notches line up and get this pinned on. And I'm actually going to stitch around this edge by 1/2 inch just by machine to hold it on, since I did have to ease it a little bit. Usually you can just pin the facing on top and that will kind of secure everything, but I feel like I might end up with some bunching if I do that. Now it actually just wants me to understitch the facing, which I was considering doing anyway. I'm going to flip the facing outward so it is flat, and then I'm just going to top stitch as close to the seam line as I can, and that's going to encourage it to turn inward. And I can't do that for the kind of button placket portion of this, but I can do it around the collar, which is also where the fabric is thickest and needs the most help turning inward. So I'm going to quickly do that. So I don't know if you can tell, that is all now finished, and now I'm just going to fold the facing inward. And you can see how it really like kind of naturally wants to fold itself inward instead of just sticking out, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to pin this and ease this around parts like the shoulders. And then I'm going to sew it down by hand, and I'm probably also going to do the buttonholes, which I'm pretty sure they have as a last step, but it makes way more sense to me to do this. I can keep it flat and it's in this current state. And I originally went through all of my buttons and I pulled out green buttons for this because I thought that would be delightful. But I've just remembered that I actually have a few button and buckle sets that I think come with 3 buttons, which is the perfect amount for this dress. So I'm going to dig those out. I might have one in gray, which would be perfect for this. So yeah, I'm going to do that as soon as I finish this step because I don't want to forget and end up using the green buttons instead. Because knowing me, that is a likely possibility. This is my new and improved buckle storage. Unfortunately, I hung this ironing board too low and it's now really difficult to get any of these doors open, but the last one is kind of the best out of all of them. I think the ones here and this one are the only ones that I've actually purchased. I've been very lucky in terms of having people gift me buckles, but that is the buckle set I had in mind. However, now that I look at it, it has more buttons than I need, so I'd feel kind of bad using it for this project. I think I might actually use a coverable button set instead. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it for a while longer. And in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and whip stitch around this by hand, and then I shall be back when it is done. So I definitely didn't forget that I was filming this project. I just didn't film the entire process of making the sleeves. I sewed the facing in just like I said I was going to. Then I ironed it pretty thoroughly, and I've also marked the buttonhole placement onto the front of the fabric, and I've already threaded my machine with the necessary color, so I'm good to go. And now they have the buttonholes done at the end. I wanted to do them before the skirt was attached just because I thought that would make it easier. But then I realized that the cuffs also have buttonholes in them, so that's why I decided to do the sleeves next. So the sleeves are finished aside from buttons at this point. They have a seam up the side, and then they have a slash kind of parallel to that seam, which is bound with bias binding that creates the opening. So now that is ready for the buttonholes, and I did add about 2 inches of length to the sleeves. Though I didn't make a mock-up for this, it looked like the sleeves were going to run really short. The next step is just going to be sewing buttonholes and getting those attached. I dug around my button boxes and decided that I want to use these. I thought the color of this was really nice and played off of all of the tones in the fabric really, really nicely. But I only have 3 of them. Though I originally thought I only needed 3 buttons for this project, I actually need 5, since there are buttons at the cuffs as well. So I'm going back to my first plan of using these. And though I don't love the belt buckle for this, I think it's going to look pretty nice in the end. So I have some buttonholes to sew, and then I will be able to get started on the skirt. So this is what the skirt looks like. When I was cutting out the skirt, I actually didn't have enough fabric to cut it to be the full width. So mine is about 3 inches too narrow, actually 6 inches too narrow in total, since that's supposed to be cut out twice. I also cut the center back on a fold because that just made more sense to me. And I'm also going to be avoiding that little dart they have there. They want you to finish that dart and then turn that into a placket, which you can install a zipper in or a hook closure. But I'm just going to do that in the seam since I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. And then the back portion will be more densely gathered than the front. So yeah, instead of putting the zipper there, I'm just going to leave it open to about here and then sew the zipper in there. I actually have to work on something else right now, and I can't have these on my table, so I'm just going to get them quickly pinned together, and then I will revisit them later tonight and hopefully get this project finished. I currently have 3 projects in progress, and they are all very similar. 2 of them are made from Tula pink fabrics. That's the one I'm supposed to be talking about in this video. This is one that will be seen in February's vlog, and this is one that is for the 1960s Sewing Through the Decades video. And I keep forgetting which ones I'm working on. Mostly been working on this today, but I'm calling it done for the day, and I'm moving back over to this one. So last night I went ahead and I sewed the buttons on, and as I said, I ended up going for the gray buttons, and I also cut open the buttonholes. So now all of the buttons are onto that, and the next step is going to be the skirt. So I was just trying to find some hem binding for the skirt. It's a candidate. Extra wide. Yeah, let's try this one. Now let me put away the other 1960s project and get everything out for the one that we're focusing on. So now I have the front panel on top of the back panel, and as I said, originally this was cut with a seam down the center back, but I didn't think that was necessary. And it also had darts, like very, very narrow darts right here, or it was only a dart on one side, and then on the other side it was the closing point. But I'm just going to have the closing point be at the side seam and then gather the back portion down a little bit more densely. So that means that I'm going to leave it open to about here on the right side. No, the left side. The left side. I always get confused, but I'm going to double check to make sure I don't get it wrong this time. And I'm making sure that both of my pieces have the right orientation because there are squirrels on this, and though it's a very weird print, it would be even weirder if the squirrels were upside down. So I'm just going to sew these up with probably 3/4 inch side seams since I don't want the selvage to be in the way. And then I can get to hemming it. And I know this is horrible, but I'm probably going to hem it before I gather it just because that's going to make the process a whole lot easier. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to align this up on top of the hem and top stitch kind of as close as I can to the edge of the lace, then fold that inward by a little bit. I just hemmed 2 skirts, or got binding sewn on to the hems for 2 skirts. This is one of them. Then the other one is the jellyfish dress, which is also made out of Tula pink fabric. But it's interesting, both of them took just under a full pack of bias binding to hem. So I think they very clearly draped these or drafted these with that in mind, so people would have to buy fewer materials, which is really, really nice. It's interesting, before when I was working with McCall's, I wasn't working super directly with them, so I kind of just send off my pattern and my sample and have no idea what was happening up until it came out. But now I have people that I talk to more directly, so I'm learning things about how much yardage can go into a specific pattern and how seasonally how many pieces you can have per pattern, and trying to keep that in mind when designing. Now I'm just turning the hem inward by 2.5 inches, and it's really just like a 2-inch hem, but the lace makes up the top 1/2 inch. and I held it up to me and I thought that looked nice. And I don't know why I'm having to ease this because it should be straight. I probably should have ironed the lace tape after sewing it on. We'll see if that gets me in trouble later. I've never used, well, I use lace binding all the time, but I've never used packaged lace binding before. And I know it does have some give to it because they recommend using it on stretch fabrics or knits. So it might behave a little bit differently than what I'm used to. And whenever I do use lace binding, I'm not using the type that comes packaged like bias binding, except for this moment, obviously. Usually I'm just using lace off of big rolls that I have in my stash because I got a bunch of rolls really, really cheap in Pennsylvania one year. And I was actually digging through my laptop the other day and came across footage from the first time, or the second time I guess, my mom and I went to Pennsylvania. The first time I tried filming it. So maybe that'll see the light of day someday, though it's probably really repetitive to the year that I did post about. I don't know if we're going again this year. I'd like to, but I'd also like to go to Vermont or Connecticut or somewhere else and try antiquing because I know there's a lot out there. So that is the hem pinned. I'm just going to sew this with a whip stitch, and I'm probably going to do that off camera in front of the TV. Okay, so I went ahead and whip stitched down that top edge. I did it while watching Grand Tour specials with my dad. It makes me so sad that Top Gear doesn't really exist in its current state anymore, and I don't think Grand Tour is nearly as good. The humor just doesn't feel as natural, and I don't enjoy it nearly as much, but I do still like watching the specials. And I got several things hemmed, a whole bunch of hand sewing done while working on that, or while watching that, so that's nice. And now I have to iron this because I didn't really iron it during any other stages. And I also want to give you a little update on my good old iron friend. We're in a pretty serious relationship right now. I've gotten quite a few questions about how I like it, and I think I've said in YouTube comments that I really, really enjoy it. But since I introduced it in a Patreon exclusive video, it seems fitting to talk about it once again. And it's like our 2-month anniversary now, because I bought it at the beginning of January. So I really, really love this. I've never used an iron that irons as effectively and as quickly and as thoroughly as this one. And it's very, very heavy, which I think adds to that. So I've seen people complain about the fact that it made their wrists sore, and for me it doesn't do that. It's just not a motion, well, knock on wood at least, it hasn't yet. But ironing has never really been a motion that I find really bothers my wrists, unless I'm doing like lots and lots of yardage of fabric. And that was mostly because my other iron was so weak that I just had to go over parts and really push down. But since this is so heavy, it kind of presses the fabric for you and you're just gliding it across the top. So I've been really, really pleased with it. I think the biggest negative I can say about it is the fact that you just have to have this base set up for it. So it's kind of like an industrial machine where you need a somewhat permanent, intrusive setup to have one, because you do have to have the water hanging up and it takes a little while to figure out the cord placement, but it really presses things very, very nicely. I've been super impressed with it. I would definitely recommend if you're considering getting one. Like, look how quickly I ironed that. I was talking, it still only took 2 minutes. Anyway, I actually love it so much that I've bought it accessories. Like, my old iron never inspired me to buy it accessories. So now I also have this tailoring board for pressing the chest of garments and also the seams on this curved edge. I also bought a vintage tailor board, and the difference between a tailored board and the other board, even though they're both used for tailoring, is that this one doesn't have a pad on it. So you use the points on this to get really sharp creases and lapels. So you can use this for the points, you can use these for various rounded edges, you can fit like the bust seam of something to this and actually iron it on that, and then you can flip it over and it's more sturdy and you have another lapel pressing thing. And this is just the June tailor board, and I got this one for about $20 including shipping, but the pricing varies a lot. So I know I said I was going to chat and answer some questions while I gather the top edge of this, but it is currently, Kara really doesn't want to focus on that because I have a very, very poor font choice with that background, but it is 11:17 at night. So I think I'm going to gather this quickly off camera, or maybe I'll film it and I'll just have it speeded up and playing while I've been talking. So I'm just jumping in because I'm totally missing a clip and I have no idea where it went, but basically here I am just pinning the now gathered skirt onto the the bottom edge of the bodice. The front edges actually lap over each other where the button placement is, and then the skirt is sewn on top of those, so the button closure actually can't open past the waist. And the only portion that is left open is the left side, which is where the zipper is placed. And I know I filmed that, but I have no idea where that footage went, so I'm just dipping in to show you here. This is the zipper, and it is just a metal zipper. It's a relatively stiff zipper actually, but it is a vintage zipper that I purchased at an estate sale. So this is what the dress looks like finished. I just paired it with some white socks and some gray boots that match the buttons. It is a little bit baggy for me in the bust, but it fits well through the shoulders, and I think overall it is just a cute, fun little dress. So I'm officially sick of having a bin devoted to this project when that bin only contains a spool of thread, less than a quarter of a yard of fabric, some buttons that I'm not using for this project, and a belt that belongs in my bedroom. So I want to get this finished up, and at this point all that is left to do is to create the belt. So the buttons I ended up using came with a belt buckle, and though this pattern doesn't necessarily call for a belt or have instructions for one, it seemed like a good idea to make one. So that is what I'm going to do today. I can't remember what the last clip in this video was because I've been filming other stuff this week, but I have tried the project on and I'm happy to report that it fits. So to make the belt, I'm just going to cut a straight piece of fabric that is about maybe 7 inches larger than my waist measurement. And I'm going to cut this piece out to be twice the width I want the belt to be, plus 1 inch for seam allowance. And the belt buckle that I'm using is just under 1.5 inches. So that means that we want our belt to be just under 1.5 inches, which means we have to cut this to be 3 3/4 of an inch wide, something like that. And now I'm going to cut out a piece of pretty heavy duty interfacing that's the same dimension. I don't know if it was in this video or another one, but I actually refilled my stash of interfacing on a recent trip to Joann's. So I have 10 yards of it, which should last me throughout March. I'm actually going to cut out a few strips of interfacing and then just piece it together so I don't have to kind of ruin a yard of it or make a yard of this more narrow. I wish I had something more exciting to say, but not a whole lot's been going on. I've just been working, so my 1830s riding costume is almost done, and I'm starting fitting a few projects and draping some new stuff today, so that's exciting. I also got my Sunflower remake sent off, so I'm really relieved to have that done. And I finished up the other 1960s projects. I'm starting on the 70s mock-up today, and I feel like things are moving forward. Not at the pace I originally wanted, but they are moving forward, which is good. Actually, do you know something that is exciting? I applied to be an extra on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, because apparently they film in New York City, which is not super close to where I live, but it's close enough that I could make it work, and I think it'd be a cool experience since I love that show so much, and I love the clothing on that show so much. I think I'm probably a little bit heavier and a little bit taller than the people they were looking to cast, so I don't imagine it's going to work out, but it was a cool opportunity regardless. And they described them as looking for women between 18 and 35 who had 1950s or 60s look to them and shoulder length natural colored hair, which is basically how I would describe myself on Tinder if I had a Tinder. Like, that is me in a nutshell. So it seemed like it was worth applying to, but we'll see if anything comes out of it. And now I'm just going to go ahead and iron this, and it's probably going to be a pretty satisfying process since my new iron irons interfacing very, very nicely. So now I'm just going to go ahead and fold this in half and sew it as a tube. And I'm going to backstitch at both ends, and then I'm going to fold it so the seam allowance is at the center back. And I'm going to cut and sew one end into a point. So I shall kind of try and show you that process. So I just moved the center seam to the center and I trimmed it down. Then I give it an iron and I marked the point. So now I'm just going to sew this and then I will trim off all of this excess and turn it right side out. Also, sorry for the chip nail. That's annoying. Okay, so that took a little bit longer to turn right side out than I was expecting, but I think it looks pretty nice, and I really like the weight of this interfacing. It feels similar to the weight of real vintage dress belts that I have. So I do want to end up getting some band roll, which is what was traditionally sold as waistbanding and is still used to reinforce waistbands, but it's kind of difficult to find a source that has it affordable. But anyway, this fits really nicely onto the belt buckle, so now I just have to wrap this end around the belt buckle. So I'm going to turn this inward by 1/2 inch, and then I'm just going to pin it on like so and whip stitch that on and try and do it really, really nice and securely. And then when it actually comes to the belt being worn, I can flip through there, and there's enough tension on it that it shouldn't come undone on its own. So that's what I'm going to be up to, and I'm going to watch Poldark while I'm at it. Season 2. This show is very, very dark. Like, it is literally filmed very dark, and it's making me realize that I need to clean my computer screen because all I'm seeing is glare. Okay, I don't think it really goes with this outfit, but that is the belt finished. And when it's worn over the actual dress, which has the zipper and the hook closure, it'll be over a much sturdy base, so it won't be prone to kind of slipping around the way it is right now when it's just over a loose t-shirt. And with that done, this whole project is finished. I really hope to finish this video off with some more photos of the dress, but the weather here has been awful. Well, that's not true. It's actually been really nice the past couple of days, but on the days where I've had someone available to take photos of me, the weather has been terrible. It's either been snowing or freezing or raining or some combination of the three. So I don't have worn photos of this dress just yet, but I will post them on Patreon as soon as I have them. So I apologize for the lack of conclusion to this video, but I really hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much if you participated in the polls about this project and voted on a design or fabric choice. I hope you like how it turned out. Thank you so much for watching and for the support, and I shall talk to all of you in another video very soon.